Hello, this is Michael from the Audible Local Ledger in Mashpee, Massachusetts on Thursday, April 2nd, 2026, reading selected articles from the Provincetown banner. First article, Harwich reopens herring run harvest. An article by Heather McCarran of the Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. After more than 20 years of watching herring swim up the Herring River from the ocean each spring without being touched, Harwich is reopening one of its runs, just a crack, with 150 permits as part of an Atlantic Coastal States initiative. The Harwich Select Board has voted unanimously to allow a limited recreational harvest at Johnson's Plume at the West Reservoir in the Bell's Neck Conservation Area starting in April, reviving a traditional practice. Select Board Chairman Don Howell emphasized that enforcement will be stricter than in the past. Quote, "There's not going to be dozens and dozens of cars 24 hours a day just taking bucket loads of fish and driving away unsupervised," he said, unquote. "Somebody's going to be watching this more closely than the last time. And it's a victory for me to get it open 7 days," end quote. After years of closure, a limited number of herring runs can open. The harvest in Harwich was halted in 2004 amid concerns about declining fish populations. 2 years later, in 2006, Massachusetts followed with a statewide ban on the harvest of river herring, with the exception of indigenous tribes, according to the State Division of Marine Fisheries. In 2022, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which coordinates fishery management across Atlantic coastal states, approved a plan allowing towns such as Harwich to reopen herring runs for recreational harvesting under strict limits with oversight by state fisheries agencies. Harwich is the first Cape Cod town to implement a plan under the framework. Two other plans, one for the Nemasket River in Middleborough and Lakeville, and one for Herring Brook in Pembroke, have been approved through the same commission process, but have not yet been put into active use with permits and scheduled harvest windows. What are the guidelines for herring harvests in Harwich? Harvesting will be allowed only at Johnson's Flume during the specific preset dates and time, generally limited to 3-hour windows. Outside those periods, taking herring will continue to be prohibited. No other locations along the Herring River or its tributaries will be opened. Johnson's Flume, the location of this historical harvest, has seen some very high herring counts in recent years, sometimes topping 1 million, said the Harwich Natural Resources Director Stephanie Ridenauer. The program will allow for scientific data collection. State Division of Marine Fisheries representatives will be on site to sample the fish for size, gender, and species. Alewives and blueback herring, the two species that make up river herring, helping to inform future management decisions. Of the 150 permits, 120 will go to Harwich residents or taxpayers, and 30 will be reserved for non-residents. Each permit holder will be limited to 20 fish per harvest day, using dip nets only, which Ridenauer said is in keeping with historical methods. The permits are non-transferable, and the harvest is strictly recreational, so permit holders can't, quote, be selling them for bait or other purposes, end quote, she said. The limited harvest is designed to remain well below what fisheries managers consider sustainable. The plan, approved by the Fisheries Commission and the state, allows for harvesting up to 10% of the average run. But Harwich is proposing significantly less, at about 2.9%. Ridenauer outlined the fishing plan to the Select Board at a March 23rd meeting. Quote, "We're choosing to be quite conservative," end quote, Ridenauer said. If all 150 permit holders harvested their full 20 fish limit on each of the 6 scheduled fishing dates, The total catch could reach up to 3,000 fish per date, or 18,000 fish overall. Enforcement will involve multiple agencies, including her office, the State Division of Marine Fisheries, and environmental and local police, she said. Town Administrator Jay McGrail said Ridenour will be able to, quote, adjust on the fly should herring counters observe any problems. When is the herring harvest allowed in Harwich? The scheduled days are April 12th and 13th, 8 to 11 a.m., April 19th, 1 to 4 p.m., April 20th, 2 to 5 p.m., April 27th, 8 to 11 a.m., April 28th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., April 29th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Permits are required for anyone 16 or older, while younger participants must be accompanied by a permitted adult. Permits will be sold in person only at the Natural Resources Office at Saquatucket Harbor, 715 Main Street, Harwichport, starting on April 4th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and then during regular business hours until sold out. Pricing is set at $30 for residents or taxpayers, $15 for seniors 65 and older, and $70 for non-residents. After harvesting, Ridenour explained, harvesters will be required to check out with staff and will be given a catch card documenting the number of fish taken and the date. The card will serve as proof of legal possession for up to 60 days. Division of Marine Fisheries Executive Director and Fisheries Commission Chairman Dan McKiernan said he's confident about the town's plan and sees it as a model that fisheries officials can learn from for other communities interested in reopening their own runs. Public comment at the March 23rd meeting was supportive. Quote, I think I am speaking for a lot of people who have lived a long time on the Cape and have always valued the spring tradition of going down to streams and getting some herring for food and bait, end quote, said Susan Phillips, an Orleans resident and longtime volunteer at the herring counter. Quote, it seems like a very well thought out, well-designed plan. End of article. Next article. Signs, songs, and civic expression at No Kings Rally in Falmouth. An article by Denise Coffey of the Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. Falmouth. Shortly after noon on Saturday, the Village Green, the town's hub for civic expression, began to fill with people for a Cape Cod version of a No Kings protest. They stationed themselves along the white fence that ran along the triangular park sandwiched between Main and West Main that once served as a training ground for colonial militia. Many of the folks knew each other from previous protests, drawn together by a shared contempt for policies of President Donald Trump they feel are authoritarian and cruel. Their signs poked fun of Trump, mocked the constitutionality of the war in Iran, decried the administration's immigration policies, and mourned the deaths of U.S. citizens at the hands of ICE agents. For Jim Newman, the protests, held regularly at a highly visible place in downtown Falmouth, are steps in the right direction. Quote, we're building community, end quote, he said. Falmouth resident Ruth Ann Molyneux's reason for participating was similar. She stood with two women, one with a sign that read, Ugh, where do I even start? Quote, for us, it's how many are in accord with us, how many have similar beliefs, end quote, she said. Quote, this won't make a difference to Trump supporters, but I hope it makes a difference to Congress. Newman is a member of the indivisible Falmouth, which held a No Kings protest for the last 40 Saturdays, the biggest ones in June and October. Before the protest began Saturday, Newman gathered who he called 12 safety marshals around him. The marshals, who were to be stationed throughout the crowd, wore bright yellow vests. Most of them had gray hair or beards. They were a precaution against potential troublemakers. They wore around their necks and made sure that they tuned their radios before sending them to their stations. The sun was out, but temperatures hovered around 33 degrees. Will protests change anything? The No Kings movement has grown since the first one held in June 2025. The moniker is a slam at President Trump, who critics say has acted more like a king than a president. Reuters has reported that participation in No Kings events has expanded from about 2,100 locations in June of 2025 to more than 2,600 in October. The March 28th protest was expected to be held in about 3,300 locations. Falmouth co-organizer Rosemary Carey expected about 3,000 people to show up. Carey said indivisible Falmouth members were asked to bring someone who hadn't been to a protest before. She stood at a table ready to hand out literature and schedules for the event. Quote, "We think we're at a point where many people are ready to be outspoken, but don't consider themselves protesters," she said. Quote, "They've had enough." A small main stage in the middle of the park became the focal point of the event. People packed around it while Peter Clark took the stage to lead, quote, "We shall not be moved," end quote. He ran through a practice round before the crowd joined in. In the middle of singing, the woman yelled, quote, "We are not all radical leftists." Many laughed. Laughter, lightness, nonviolence, and peacefulness have been part of the No Kings movement since its inception. Carey admonished the crowd not to engage with agitators who might show up. Newman told his marshals where the police details were stationed. One woman walked the green in a turtle costume. A couple dressed their dog in a glittery coat. She wore a crown reading "No Kings" and a sign on her back reading "Only Queens." Speakers Sheriff Donna Buckley, Barnstable County Assemblyman Dan Gesson, Sandra Feynman Silva, a child care advocate, Karen Nell Smith, pastor of the Edwards United Church of Christ in Saxonville, and Sayena Mausi, an educator and Falmouth advocate for racial justice, spoke about more serious subjects: the war in Iran, alleged abuses by ICE agents, corruption, and transparency. Rena Petrosian, a senior at Falmouth High School, read aloud from the preamble of the Constitution. Quote, "Remembering our constitutional rights is essential because we do not live in an authoritarian state." Tom Savacone was in Falmouth to celebrate his 78th birthday, but he found time to join the crowd. The self-described independent from Albany, New York, didn't have a lot of good things to say about either the Democrats or Republicans, but he did say showing up at the protest was important. Quote, "MAGA has taken center stage," he said. "This gives people an opportunity to voice their opinions." End of article. Next article. Historic Chatham Boathouse lifted onto new home on Bridge Street. An article by Zain Razak, Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. Chatham. After 17 years spearheading an effort to save and return the historic U.S. Coast Guard boathouse back to town, David Doherty ultimately had to watch its journey home from afar. On vacation in South Carolina, Doherty and friend Jack Farrell monitored Wednesday's going on their laptops, with friends sending videos, text, and photos to keep them updated. In an operation that took about 4 minutes, a crane lifted the boathouse for the 10th and final time and placed it on its new home at 90 Bridge Street in Chatham, where it will now house the town's shellfish hatchery. Quote, "It was a very frustrating but exciting, the culmination of all those years," end quote, said Farrell, "of not being able to be there in person. Quote, "When it happens, it's almost like the adrenaline stops flowing." Quote, "But then there's a relief." The boathouse that stood on Stage Harbor for over 70 years was the home of the famed motor lifeboat Coast Guard 36-500. The lifeboat crew rescued 32 men from the wrecked tanker Pendleton off the coast of Cape Cod on February 18, 1952, in what is considered one of the greatest small boat rescues in Coast Guard history. It had been sent to New Bedford in January for repairs and renovations before making its way back to an 8-hour journey on Tuesday. Watching the boathouse sail by on Tuesday at Harding's Beach, Jane Sherman said she remembers the building from years ago as battered recalled its smashed windows. Creighton Nickerson said, quote, he'd always had that little concern, end quote, that the boathouse would never return, saying that, quote, sometimes you give up on history. The Coast Guard decommissioned the boathouse in the 1980s, and it stayed in storage for years. The building had been slated for demolition before a group of preservationists stepped in. Developer Jay Cashman moved the boathouse in 2009 to his Quincy shipyard by barge in hopes of finding someone interested in saving it. The boathouse was later towed to Hull in 2019 with plans to turn it into a museum. When that fell through, the boathouse went back to Quincy. Farrell said parties passionate about saving the boathouse, quote, spent hours walking every shoreline property in Chatham trying to find some place where they could repurpose it for some other use, end quote. They ran into environmental or zoning problems every time they found a spot, said Frank Messina, Historical Commission chairman. It was, quote, serendipity when they realized the boathouse was the same size as the structure town officials were proposing to house the new shellfish upweller system as part of the $11 million waterfront project, he said. Quote, historic preservation is not for the faint of heart. You know, you got to be there for the long haul, end quote, said Messina. The Chatham Select Board voted to accept the donation of the boathouse in 2021. The project is supported with a $730,620 grant in funds for the group's tanks, generator, pipes, and fittings to equip the new upweller through the State Food Security Infrastructure Grant Program. An upweller shellfish system is a nursery system designed to grow tiny shellfish seeds, primarily quahogs and oysters, and often no larger than grains of sand, to a larger, more resilient size before they are planted in open water. In all, the boathouse has taken 5 trips since it left Chatham in 2009. Ellen Briggs, president of the Protect Our Past, called it, quote, a great example of historic structure standing the test of time. Quote, it has been on barges, it has been out in weather, so it really proves our point that these buildings that were built years ago with good, strong, tight ring wood were built to weather the storms and still stand to fulfill its purpose, end quote, she said. Quote, but also for me as a child, I used to see it where it originally was with the boat and to see it come home. It just fills you up. Chatham Director of Natural Resources previously said a major adjustment needed to the boathouse was the floor itself, noting that the original structure had a sloped floor to allow boats to slip in and out. Adaptive reuse. For the next several months, the building will undergo work to become the new shellfish updweller facility. The exterior will get new shingles and a roof, painted the traditional Coast Guard colors, red, white, and blue, while the inside will be retrofitted for its new purpose. Messina said he hopes to apply to Mass Historic to get the structure listed on the National Register as a historic site, saying that, quote, it should really be the climax of the whole thing. Quote, we call it adaptive reuse. Every historic building can't be a museum. You got to have a use for it. So in this case, it's something which we will actually have a use, and hopefully it will be here for another 100 years, he said. Ann Dixon, the sister of David Doherty, watched the boathouse as it was lifted. She said she'd been joking that, quote, a little kid's book should be written about the story. The little boathouse that could, she said. End of article. Next article. In drought, Barnstable suggests water conservation kits, rain barrels, an article by Heather McCarran, Cape Cod Times USA Today Network. Citing drought conditions in the region and worries about groundwater supplies, Barnstable has declared a state of water supply conservation with mandatory restrictions on non-essential outdoor water uses across town. The town is offering free water conservation kits and partnering with the, quote, Great American Barrel Company on a rain barrel program, giving residents a chance to collect and reuse rainwater for outdoor use. Rain barrel orders need to be placed by April 12th, and barrels will be distributed on April 24th. While some rainfall is expected in the coming weeks, state officials caution that recovery will take time. Even the 2 to 3 feet of snow that fell in some areas during the February 22 to 24 blizzard amounted to only about 2.5 inches of water, according to the state. Not enough to fully recharge rivers, lakes, ponds, and groundwater after months of below-average precipitation and substantial water deficits. For that reason, the State Executive Office of Environmental and Energy Affairs, Secretary Rebecca Tepper, said in a recent statement, quote, "It is important for everyone to be mindful of how we use water." Quote, "Small actions can help protect our water supply while conditions recover," end quote, Tepper said. State officials continue to monitor conditions and are expected to review drought levels in early April. Cape Cod is in a significant drought. The decision made at the Barnstable Municipal Water Supply Board's March 17th meeting follows the state's recent designation of Cape Cod as being in a level 2, quote, significant drought, end quote, and it is in keeping with requirements under the State Water Management Act. In an advisory issued March 17th, the town's Department of Public Works Water Supply Division stated that, quote, a potential water shortage exists, end quote, and said that the declaration was made to, quote, help conserve water and ensure a reliable supply for essential needs such as drinking water and fire protection. Mandatory restrictions in Barnstable. Under Barnstable's Conservation Declaration, non-essential outdoor water use, defined in the advisory as water not, quote, not required for health or safety reasons by regulation for production of food and fiber for livestock maintenance or to meet core functions of a business, is now limited. Outdoor watering is restricted to handheld hoses or buckets only, and allowed no more than 2 days per week. Odd-number addresses can water on odd-numbered days, while even-numbered addresses are limited to even-numbered days. Watering is only allowed between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. to reduce rapid evaporation. Sprinklers and automated irrigation systems cannot be used. Additional restrictions include no vehicle washing except at commercial car washes or when necessary for safety or maintenance of agricultural or construction equipment. No washing exterior surfaces like buildings, driveways, and sidewalks, except when required for certain construction or maintenance tasks. No filling or refilling swimming pools using on-site water resources. Cape Cod and the islands remain particularly vulnerable during extended dry periods. Unlike communities with large reservoirs to draw from, the region depends on rainfall and snowmelt to recharge underground water supplies. Despite a snowy February, that recharge has been limited, according to state officials. Much of the precipitation remained locked in frozen ground or ran off into storm drains during the recent warm spells rather than soaking into the aquifers. State officials said that the drought has been building since 2024, with continued effects on stream flow and water levels across much of the state. Nantucket, which recently improved from a critical to a significant drought, imposed mandatory restrictions on March 12th. with fines for violations. Across the region's community asks residents to conserve water during a significant and critical drought conditions. Falmouth, for example, urges residents to limit outdoor watering to handheld hoses or watering cans to be used only after 5 and before 9 a.m. when the state declares a significant drought. A level 3 critical drought and a level 4 emergency drought triggers all-out ban on non-essential watering in Falmouth. Brewster is pointing residents to state water conservation suggestions, including minimizing overall water use and reducing indoor water use by taking showers instead of baths, and reducing shower length, running washing machines and dishwashers on full loads only, avoiding running water when brushing or shaving, replacing old fixtures and appliances with water-efficient models, and fixing any toilet or faucet leaks immediately. Yarmouth has mandatory conservation restrictions in place, prohibiting lawn watering with in-ground irrigation systems, handheld watering, and deep irrigation systems. Flower beds and ornamentals may be watered with handheld hoses or drip irrigation only. Washing vehicles and boats is limited to automatic shutoff, spring-loaded nozzle hoses or buckets, and no use of water for cleaning streets, driveways, sidewalks, or other impervious areas is allowed. Fines of up to $300 a day may be assessed for violations. While private irrigation wells do not have to follow these measures, the Yarmouth Water Division emphasizes that private wells take water from the same aquifer as the town's drinking water, so wise water use is appreciated. Barnstable has conservation kits, introduces rain barrel program. In Barnstable, the DPW is offering free water conservation kits to Hyannis Water System customers. The kits include water-saving shower heads, faucet aerators, and toilet tank flappers. The rain barrels, made from repurposed food-grade materials, can be connected to gutters and downspouts to capture runoff from the rooftops that can be used for gardens, lawns, and household chores, reducing the pressure on the municipal system. Rain barrels are available for $80 to $89 depending on color, and must be ordered by April 12th at greatamericanrainbarrel.com/community. Select the Community Program tab and search for Barnstable. A distribution event is set for April 24th from 1:30 to 4:30 p.m. at Barnstable High School, 744 West Main Street, Hyannis, at the eastern parking lot near the football stadium. For more information, contact Senior Planner Kate Maldonado at 774-487-2831 or caitlin.maldonado@barnstable.gov. End of article. And that's all the time I have for today. This is Michael from the Audible Local Ledger in Mashpee, Massachusetts, signing off. Have a good day. Thank you very much.